Welcome to the Blueprint for Men podcast. Today I'm excited to introduce to you Jay McElroy, friend of mine, lives right here in the area. Jay is a special person because he is an extreme athlete, an ultramarathoner, but most importantly, he is a follower of Christ. He's a husband, he's a father, he's a business owner, and I'm excited to have this interview with you, Jay. I've known you peripherally. I know, a little bit about what you do, but I'm excited to hear what you've got to share. We're working on going through the month of March right now, which is about physical fitness. When we think about a man, we think about the core of his strength, which is physical, mental, and spiritual. What I say for most guys, really what distinguishes us from women is actually our strength, our physical strength. And to be vital and really feel good about ourselves as men, we need to be fit. And so that's kind of be the direction we're going to go, but we're going to find out about Jay McElroy and a little bit about how you came to be at this point of your life, what you're doing. Both of us are getting older. We have a lot to look back at. We've got things that we've succeeded at, things that maybe we've struggled with. But this is just going to be a conversation. And this is the first podcast that we've actually had that's face-to-face in a little studio that I've set up here in this old warehouse. So thank you, Jay, for your time and pushing me to get this little studio set up. We've got a few books here, clock, skull, axe. We gotta get a little man code going here. Yeah. But Jay, thank you. What I'd like to ask you right away at the front end is your actual family. Tell us a little bit about your family right now, and then we're going to get into about your occupation and your education, and it's going to all flow starting, where you are right now. And then we'll eventually get to this conversation about fitness.
Sure. Well, my family right now is, I'm married to Stefanie, and we've been married 37 years. I have two boys, both married, and they both have children, one 3 and one more on the way, so they'll have 4 soon, and the other, my youngest son, has 1 child. So we have 4 grandchildren. It's quite a blessing, but I want to tell you a little bit about growing up or family there. I grew up in rural Alabama on a farm, and my father and mother both graduated from Southern Adventist University. It wasn't Southern Adventist University
right.
then, but they were both the first children in their families to go to college and get a degree. And but we grew up on my father's childhood place, a farm in Cuba, Alabama, and just being there in that environment, outdoors, woods, rural, kind of probably set the stage for some of the things that I like to do and the hobbies that I took on later. And that was a big part, and still a big part of my life, because that's where I work now, and that's where Cody lives. And my oldest son is named Cody, and Kevin, my youngest son, is a fireman in Bradley County. They're here locally. But it was good growing up there. Learned a lot. Spent a lot of time with my grandfather growing up. My dad worked really hard, long hours. My grandfather was kind of retired, so we grew up with him, helping him with his cows and whatnot on the farm. And you can learn a lot on a farm dealing with animals from a young age. You learn a lot about life and death really soon. And I think it's good lessons, and I wouldn't trade it for anything.
Yeah, I never experienced that. I grew up in a, kind of suburban more setting, but I always look fondly at people that have had that experience, because I think you really nailed it. You learn so much about life and death and the hard things that sometimes people get insulated from today's world.
Yeah.
So now, who started the McElroy truck lines? Because I know that that's been kind of a main pathway of work.
Yes. My father, when he graduated from Southern, he went to work at a local hospital there near where we lived. in insurance or billing or collections, some menial business type entry-level job. And he wanted to do something else on the side because he didn't think he was going to be able to take care of his family with just that income. And he had grown up around cattle and row crop farming, and my grandfather also logged. So those are three things he knew on the side, and he was like, I want to start something. And he started off logging. So as a side business, he logged, cut trees, sold them to local mills or delivered them to local mills. And so us growing up, we grew up around logging equipment in the woods with him when he would go and visit. And that just evolved over time into some trucking, and then over the road trucking and flatbeds. And as the trucking side grew and the logging side kind of diminished, and the trucking side kind of took over, and it went from there. But that's how we started off, was logging. That area of the country is really, really heavy southern yellow pine.
Right.
And so almost every industry in the region revolves something to do with that tree. And everything that we've ever done has something to do with that tree. It's pretty amazing when you think about that one tree controlling so much of a area economically in people's lives, but it does. It's a powerful thing.
Interesting. You know, I love biology. I taught that for many years. Had your son Cody as a student. He was outstanding. And you know, when you learn about nature, and again, being outdoors a lot, you learn about nature. I know your father-in-law, Jack, he loves trees. He had me over to his house to help him identify a few trees that were stumping him. But I love learning about nature because there's this, it's kind of like you know, Jay, I can know your name, but at the end of this interview, I'm going to know you better than I did before. And so when you learn about a tree, you know, what disease is it susceptible to? What's the qualities of that tree that make it so valuable? It just enriches your life. And like you said, there's just so much that set the stage even for your life.
Yeah.
If it wasn't for that tree,
Exactly.
would the trucking have happened? No.
No.
And especially flatbed, isn't that
Right.
exactly what you? Yeah.
Correct. Yeah. A lot of wood products, and
Okay.
that, I guess that tree is to the south what corn would be to Iowa.
Interesting.
You know, it's kind of the same thing. It's a crop. It regrows. It has about a 30-year lifespan.
Okay, so this is pulpwood mostly. Is that what?
And lumber.
And lumber. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's I've thought about that a lot. That God put that tree in the south, and it feeds a lot of people.
Interesting.
Pretty neat.
That is cool.
Yeah.
Back to, I can't help myself. There's a book that I recommended to your father-in-law, and I would recommend it to you if you're interested, in anybody watching. It's called The Natural History of Trees. There's one for the eastern states and one for the western. But what I like about it is it fleshes out all of these stories historically of how this tree was important to the pioneers, how it's important today, but even in history, like the white pine, how important that was up in the state of Pennsylvania, the really big virgin forests that were white pine, and how those were used for the masts of the sailing ships back in the day. And a lot of the early tree flags of the states actually were featuring trees.
Yeah.
And so it's just interesting.
It is, and you know, you talk about a book with trees. We're kind of getting off the topic, but
No, this is the way these things roll.
my favorite class at Southern, I went to Southern, was field botany.
Nice.
And
I knew I liked you, Jay.
I took all these classes all these years, and I needed a science because I was trying to get out early because Stefanie and I were engaged, and I didn't want to be in school and married. I wanted to have a job when I was out, so I went to school all summer. And one of the things I did was take a science. Well, I took field botany, and it was in the Smokies, and everybody was pre-med except me.
And you crushed them, right?
Well, I did good in class. I like that class.
Exactly.
You do well what you like, right? just looking at plants and trees, and that was my favorite class of all of college.
No, I remember that class too.
Yeah.
One of the this is a funny one. I took a botany class that was called winter tree identification, whatever. It was all about how to identify trees and shrubs in the winter. You have no leaves, you just have twigs, the buds, the bark, and anyway, it was fun because you strip away everything, and I think it's going to tie into our conversation. Is that when you strip everything away, all the leaves away, and you're just left with this outline of this hardwood tree, it's so stark. There's no distractions. It's like that's the bones of the tree right there. And I think in life, where we're going to go in kind of unpacking your life, is that there are these moments, these tests that you're kind of stripped down to just the bones of who you are. And I think that's a scary place for a lot of guys to go to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've been there.
You've been there. Good. That's good.
Yeah.
All right, so we've talked about family, occupation, education. Let me ask you about your dad, because I tell you, if there's a conversation that I have with men that really gets them either a warm or a painful experience, it's with their dad. Women too. But it sounds like you had a pretty good relationship with your dad. Tell us about that.
Yeah, my dad, he was a great guy, and he very hard worker, a builder, and when I say a builder of things, of businesses, of people, and he was a great example. He and my mother had a great marriage. They're a great example to us, and he was too. It's going to be hard for me to do this.
Yeah, that's all right.
He was a good man.
Yeah. What would you say? When I think that most of us guys, we say worked hard. He was a good man, but think about character traits. It sounds like what I heard there about he cared about people.
He very much cared about people. He was very slow to anger, very patient, and very Christian, spiritual, very involved in church, taught Sabbath school classes until he got older, but just very, very devout and just set a great example. But he wasn't, Dad was never pushy with us with that. It was just, he was just a quiet example, unwavering.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Just that consistency.
Yeah. Very.
Yeah. That brings such stability to a home.
Yeah.
Just that steady.
Yes.
You knew that Dad loved you, but he was firm. It's that firm love.
Yeah, and he was a great example. I mean, you get older and you understand and see things differently, and he was a good person.
Yeah. So has he passed away by this time? Okay.
He passed away in early 2018.
Okay.
And with cancer, he had fought it for a while, and he's gone now.
What about your mom?
She's still alive. My mom is very healthy, spry lady. I say often that I probably get a lot of the determination comes from her. Dad got a lot of credit because of what he accomplished, but my mother is a beast.
That's funny.
Yeah, she's a tough lady.
A machine.
Oh yeah.
Just not going to quit, and
no.
she's tenacity.
Yes.
Interesting.
Very much so.
Sounds like some women in my life, but anyway. Yeah, no, I love that. I love that. I think that's the perfect kind of a home. There's got women that have a little bit of fire to them. There's something about that.
Yeah.
Sounds like your mom had that a little bit.
She did, and she does. Yeah.
Because McElroy, I mean that historic, as far as that lineage goes, all the way back to, as far as over in Europe.
Yeah, our family came from Ireland to Scotland to America around religious persecution, but we came in the 1600s.
Oh, wow.
So it's been a while.
Wow.
We've been here a while. And then in that area of Alabama for many generations down in that area.
Wow.
So we've been here a while.
If you could have conversations with all those different generations. It would be fascinating.
Yeah.
And that's one thing, you know, I really look forward to when I get into this part of a conversation is I only knew my grandparents as old, you know, what I thought was old anyway. They were in their 60s.
Yeah, right, exactly.
But you know, I think about them in eternity, and we're all going to be young. And those that we never met, it's going to be exciting.
It'll be good.
It's going to be so good.
Yeah, because I spent a lot of time with my grandfather growing up, and, you know, he taught us as little kids, I'm talking like grade school, he would pick us up, take us hunting, take us fishing, teach us how to shoot. He was very involved in our lives. He meant a lot to us as small children when my dad was at work and, you know, my grandfather was not, and it meant a lot to us, and that relationship was good. Yeah.
That's a blessing.
Yeah.
I know that my wife and I partly are together because of my grandfather. Anyway, we had broken up for a short amount of time, but my wife has got one of those personalities that it's hard not to love her. And but anyway, my grandfather says, I think you made a mistake there. A few weeks later, we were back together.
You're right.
Now, growing up, again, thinking about going through this family occupation, we kind of been talking about that, and we might touch on it again a little bit. But this recreation component, the thing that men love is all over the place. You obviously, because of, you know, you're a kind of extreme athlete, ultramarathoner, that's not where you started. What kind of things did you enjoy as far as physical activity growing up, and how did that transition?
Yeah. So I went to a 2-room school in Cuba, Alabama for 8 years. So we had 1 through 4 in one room and 5 through 8 in the other room. Very small. And I think we probably played 60% of the time and went to school 40% of the time.
Man, it sounds like my kind of school.
So it was a lot of sports. We played basketball, baseball. I just grew up around that, and I just love sports. And then I went to Bass Academy after the 8th grade and just played any sport that was going on at the time. You know, it's intramurals. It's not competitive sports, but sports nonetheless. I was on the gymnastics team there. I loved anything to do with that kind of activity. And then went to Southern, same thing, played everything that came up. All my friends were into sports, just loved that. I'd never done anything outside of those sports though. You know, never done any cycling or running or swimming or anything.
More team-based type stuff. Yeah, and that's very common during those years.
Yes. And then I worked for a couple years after graduating and getting married, and then Stefanie and I moved to Tuscaloosa, Alabama, and we both went to the University of Alabama and both got our masters in business. And even there they had intramurals, and all the guys in our class, we all played sports. And so after that, I find myself, now I'm working, I'm at home, removed from all the, you know, school is really, you'll look back one day and think school is the easiest time of your life. It is, and it was. And so now I'm here working and just the grind, you know, you're 8-10 hours a day, no family yet, but, you know, got responsibilities, a home and all that. And I just see myself like, I'm sitting there and I'm like declining. And physically, I feel like
so tell
I'm declining.
me, what age are you talking about? Because I think that this is, most guys kind of go through this sequence. So how old were you?
I was probably 26 at this point.
Okay.
So still very young.
Oh, yeah.
But just not used to doing nothing, and I was doing nothing.
Right.
And and I was like, it was on my mind, and I'm seeing my weight just like creep up, just slowly creep up. And I'm looking around, I'm like, I'm not gonna be 30 years old and overweight and out of shape. I'm just not going to do that. And that is what sparked the transition into the endurance stuff.
And this was, what year would have that been roughly?
This would have been probably 1993-ish, right in that time.
Now, this is really the era when the Ironman and all that kind of stuff was really, really coming to be. Is that right?
Yes. And so what I did first, I said, I'm going to set a goal because I've always been like, I need a goal.
Yeah.
And if I have a goal, I can point at it and I can do it. I'm kind of goal focused, and so I'm going to run a marathon. I'm going to take 1 year or 6 months, I forgot, and I was like, I'm going to train and I'm going to run a marathon. That's what I'm going to do. And during that time of starting to run, which was horrible, I've never run like distance in my life, and I
There
remember
was no ball involved. It's
no,
just
there's no ball and no other people. It's
Yeah.
like I'm by myself. I'm getting up early. And I picked up a magazine that was a triathlete magazine, and I had ridden a bike a few times while at Southern. My brother was at Southern with me, and he was a cyclist at Southern, and I borrowed his bike a couple times and rode, and I was like, triathlon, that has some biking, and I've done that, and I'm running now, and swimming, I can figure that out. I'd never swam competitively at all.
Right.
And I was like, I'm going to do one of those too. And so that started it.
Gotcha.
And I did my marathon, and then I went into triathlon and picked that up and did that for a lot of years. That was kind of my kickoff of endurance sports, was really triathlon.
And this was all when you were down in Cuba.
Cuba.
Is that right? I mean, this is a rural place. It's not like there's some big. How far? What's the largest city nearby?
Meridian, Mississippi is 40,000, so it's small.
Right.
And it's 30 minutes away.
Okay.
But yeah, I swam in our pond.
No.
That was
kidding.
where I swam. and it was very rural roads, great cycling roads, very rural, quiet roads, hilly. And so it was a great place to ride a bike and run. And and I just started it all from there. And I was friends too at that time, Johnny O'Brien, who's another local Adventist guy who's done a lot of endurance stuff. He and I were close, and so we kind of started triathlon together during this time. And
It was all in the 90s.
all in the 90s, and we traveled and did a lot of races, and it just kind of evolved from there.
Interesting. I want to get into, just talking about the mental, physical, spiritual. We're going to get into all this here, but making a decision and having a goal. I'd like you to talk particularly about that. You said that you're kind of that way to begin with, and then making a decision to do something that is outside of business, outside of family. I don't know, just the mindset and to have the bandwidth to do that. So much discipline involved in the thinking. I don't know if you have anything to share on that, just the mindset.
Yeah, it's, I have a blue healer, and I don't know if you've ever had a blue healer, but it kind of reminds me, Stefanie's told me it can reminds her a little bit of me. Something like as you throw that dog something, it's going to run over or run through anything that's in front of it to get that. And so that's kind of how I could be with a goal of whatever it was. So we're going to just say physical. And, by this time we're starting to have children. And so I could go on 6 hours sleep then, being a lot younger.
Yep.
Can't do that now, but I would just get up early and I would train before I went to work. And then when we got the kids to bed at night, I would train on a trainer on a treadmill up in our house. And that's how I did it. I worked around our schedule and did what I had to do because, I was going to do it.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting because I think that most guys, I have right over here, can't see it maybe in any of these cameras here, but I've got a little archway that I've got right here that I use for teaching. You got the foundation, that's up to the age of 25. That's, the building your identity. Who am I? And then the next is you're building this wall, and you get part way up, and it can kind of get unstable, and so that's what we call the bond stone, that thing right through the middle. And that's that crush of life that you're talking about. Most guys don't have the discipline or the desire to do something that is difficult on top of the difficult.
Right.
you know, which is really, I don't know if you can speak to that, because I think a lot of guys can very quickly just go into that apathetic, well, everybody else around me is overweight and not doing anything, so I'll have another pizza or whatever.
Right. I mean, it's just so freeing to do that, to break away from that, and it feels good to be fit. I mean, you feel so much better, and it you're able to do more with your family, with your kids, and you feel better. And I mean, I'm a huge proponent of fitness and pushing yourself, because I think we're just capable of doing so much more than we ever ask ourselves to do. I mean, God made us to move, and you look down through history and what men have done, and then where we are today, and we do a fraction of that, and we can just do so much more.
Right.
And we just take that first step and make a goal, whether it's a 5K or walking a 5K, just whatever it is, do it and push and be relentless, and you can do it.
And what I hear in all that is mental toughness. Even younger people today, I know that, you know, the Gen Z guys, you know, our younger guys sometimes can get a lot of flack. And maybe rightly so sometimes. I don't think it's always warranted. You know how I think every generation tends to bash on the younger.
Right.
It's not really right. But, you know, I think to really, you know, particularly speak to our younger guys too, is like, hey, you know, this is a big part of who you are as a man, but not only just the physical part, but it's that mental toughness that's kind of an outgrowth.
It does. It'll occur. In long distance endurance sports, you're going to build mental toughness. You've got to finish it and to do it, and it's important. I mean, it'll serve you in whatever physical endeavors you're taking on, but also your personal and professional. And that mental toughness that's the key. At the end of the day, that's the key to being successful, especially in ultra distance. It's mental more than physical. And you'll hear a lot of people say that, but it's true.
Yeah.
It really is.
Yeah.
It really is. And so it can be developed. It's like any skill. You can get stronger and more mentally strong just by pushing yourself. Train at night, train in the bad weather. All those things, as far as physical fitness, will train you mentally to be stronger. And so we just have so much more capabilities. You know, we talked about a little bit about books, and one thing I've listened to a lot running or audio books. And I got on this kick where I listened to these Vietnam War books, biographies of these guys, and the things that they did and went through physically. Unbelievable. And, you know, I'm sitting here thinking a lot of times I use that on myself when you're kind of feeling down on yourself and your feet are hurting or whatever. It's like, you're not doing anything, you know. Suck it up and keep going. You're capable of doing more.
Right. You know, it's interesting. I appreciate that, you know, listening to something, because that's a really good thing to do if you're out on a bike or whatever. You can do something with that time. It's not just wasted. And to be silent too is not wasted. But throughout history, there's been struggle, you know. Man against nature was the big one for most of Earth's history, you know, just to be able to get enough food to eat, you know.
Right.
You know, what you didn't get enough rain, what are you going to do, you know? Then there's man against man, you know, all of the struggle that has gone on with wars and everything else, even in a marriage, man against woman. I mean, conflict is going to happen. But then I think that there's that man against himself, you know, that internal battle. And I think that, you know, that resiliency you're talking about plays into every arena when you are physically strong.
I mean, I think it's important for men to have some time to be with themselves and train and get strong. I mean, it's a natural thing to do, and I think it's good to push yourself more than, you know, than just time with your wife, which is important, but I think it's also important for you to be successful in all aspects of your life, to push yourself physically and mentally alone and in some physical aspect. Yeah, for sure.
I've got a few things I was going to kind of get into some details here because, injuries can happen. You need to get your rest, training cycles, all that kind of stuff, nutrition. I don't know what you want to address on all of those avenues, but to me, let's just start with rest. How do you have a cycle that makes sure you get enough rest? What about that?
Yeah. Well, I'm 58 now, and I can definitely tell I need more rest than ever before. And I think each person kind of has to figure that out. And your body, you'll listen to your body. It'll tell you what you need to do and not do. It's just be in tune to it and listen. If you're dead and not feeling good and can't train, then you probably need some more rest. But when I was much younger, I could go on a lot less sleep. But I think rest for me right now is critical. And for me personally, I try to get 8 to 8.5 hours of sleep.
So are you getting that sleep earlier and getting up earlier? You know what I mean?
Right. I try to my goal is to be up, unless I have some early appointment. I usually get up around 6 every morning, so back that up, 10 o'clock, 9:30 is what I try to do. But rest is critical. I mean, for work, if you're tired, or your family, or with your children or grandchildren, if you're tired, you're not much use.
No, you're probably worse than that.
And it gets worse as we get older, for sure.
Yeah.
So I think rest is critical, and then for injury prevention and healing while you're sleeping, if you're physically beat down.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
I know that just thinking about the rest, I always remind guys that when God set up the cycle of the day, it started with the night. And so the day that we're having today, Jay, started last night. So if you don't go to bed, you're playing video games up till 2 a.m. Guess what kind of day you're having right now?
It's going to be rough.
Yeah, not good.
And I've done 2 200-mile races in my life so far. And
it's beyond, I just go.
And you really understand rest in that race, because you can go do a 100-mile race and miss one night's sleep. So you go all one night, and all of us could go one night if we're physically moving and not have to lay down and sleep. You're capable.
Right.
But to go 4 nights and have little to no or 1 hour sleep, it's unreal what it will do to your body and mind. As you get into that 3rd and 4th night without rest or with very little, it's just you're in this state of confusion and haziness, and your mind is just
shutting down pretty much.
Shutting down.
Yeah.
I mean, you will learn that how important rest is when you skip it for 4 days.
So the mind, really, it's interesting because I've heard this so many times. The mind is the part of the whole your person that needs the rest more than the body. The body needs it too, but
yes, when you're for sure, and those long events, and it's your mind that will stop you before your body will, because you'll have blisters and pain and all that, but blisters aren't going to kill you.
No.
And anything that you're doing to yourself running is not going to kill you. But if you let it get in your mind and you just start down that path of negative thought, and it's a downward spiral, and it leads to failure. I mean,
Interesting.
It will pull you over the edge into failure. And so rest is important there, and then also positive mindset is important in that time too.
I want to jump in here because I think that the goal setting that you talked about, big in your life, when you have some goal that is really massive, it's like, no, that's impossible. It's in the realm of impossibility. How do you even think about it? I mean, a 200-mile, I want to hear specific about, I think the one race I heard about, I hear these things about Jay, and I'm going, what in the world? But it was something out in Wyoming, out in the foothills of the Wind River Range. I don't know. I'd like to hear, because I love that part of the country.
Yes.
And so I want to hear about that race, and maybe they play into this whole setting little goals. I don't know how you do it.
Well, for me, I set a goal. So if I pick a goal race that's some months in the future, and then I just, like, each day, there's a part of that day is in preparation for that goal in the future. And it's just every day you do something. For me, if we're talking about just training for that race, every day I spend some time training for that race, whether it's running or strength building or whatever I spend in preparation for that goal in the future. So I'm just like working toward it, and just like focus on now and don't think about the race at that time, because I've done races before when I finish 30-mile races and you think in your mind, how could you run 3 times this, as exhausted as I am now? But that's a trap to fall into. Don't do that, because you're not running that at that moment. Your focus was on that one. So focus on what your goal is and just chip away at it every day. Just chip away and build toward it. And that's how I do it. And just add up that training time and that prep time, and you'll be ready.
So when you're out there, let's go to Wyoming. I want to hear about this. So this is in the winter, if I remember right. Is that right?
It is.
Just tell me how this whole thing lined up. And when you call it a race, it's primarily just finishing.
That's my goal.
I mean, come on.
And in this race, the goal is to finish alive.
Well, yeah, preferably, yeah.
Yeah. But no, this was a race so I run with a group of guys, and we primarily stay in the South, but we like to go do things in areas that we've never been into or we don't experience, like the mountains. And so I was reading about races, and I read about this race in the snow in Wyoming, and I was like, there's a good one. We've never done that. None of us are even around snow.
Yeah.
And so I went the first year I went and volunteered there just to check it out and learn. And so I went and helped with the race, talked to participants, learned about what they did, the gear they were using, do's and don'ts, made a contact that we all called several times leading up to the race the next year to get information from. But it is a race in Wyoming. It actually goes on this coming weekend is the next round of it. But we went in and did it, and it's a 100-mile race in the snow. It's on snowmobile track.
Okay.
So it's packed. If you step off, you're going to be in waist deep drift.
Sure.
So it's packed area, and you pull a sled.
Wow.
And you pull a sled with a duffel bag, and in that duffel bag is required gear that they make you bring to basically keep you alive if you have a meltdown or injury or whatever.
Right.
And so the first year we did it, we had a blizzard. And so here all these guys from the Deep South were out there pulling sleds. It was 3 of us that went, and we had been out 2 nights already. We were in the second night, so you're already, a little bit off from that, and probably a few hallucinations starting to come in. And then this heavy snowstorm rolls in, and you fight through and keep going, and we did, and it was hard. It was very hard, very challenging. It was deep snow. We got like 8 inches of snow right there in the last stages of that race, but we managed to finish it and come back and get it done, and we've been back 2 other times since then to do it again.
Goodness.
So
no frostbite?
The second year I had frostbite.
Oh, did you?
And
where at?
It was on the side of my foot. And in
really?
fact, your son,
is
my doctor,
yeah.
and he was like, I've never seen frostbite, and I never expected to see it in Tennessee.
Yeah.
But I had some frostbite on the side of my little toe, and I didn't know it at the time. I didn't feel it. It was very cold, and you get wet.
Yep.
But when I got in the shower after the race, it felt like my foot was burning. I had a burning sensation, and it slowly over the next few days turned black on the side of my toe.
Oh, yeah.
But it wasn't severe. It just peeled off and it went away. But it was some frostbite, and we had a guy get it on his nose and another guy get it on his foot. So it's real. I mean, it's 30 below, wind chill,
And we're talking, this is not like mountaineering boots.
No.
You've got specialized footwear, I'm sure. What do you wear?
It's funny because it's my regular running shoes
Really?
with sheet metal screws in the bottom.
No kidding.
That's it.
But what about insulation?
That was a shocking thing that I learned when I volunteered. Is the guy that won the race that year, he said, do not wear Gore-Tex shoes. He said, because you're going to sweat. And if you think about it, the first thing you do when you exert yourself, you feel sweat on your hands and on your feet.
Right.
And he said, as long as you're moving, your feet will be fine. And he said, they're going to get wet, but they're going to get wet from sweat anyway.
Right.
And just change your socks periodically. And he said, just wear your regular running shoes. And that's what we've done every year. And, if you're just on the outside looking in, planning for that, you wouldn't have done that.
Right.
I mean, I've seen guys in that race wear boots with trash bags, their foot in a trash bag in the boot, and get pulled for frostbite.
Wow.
Because you get wet, it's not going to dry out,
Right.
and then it freezes. But it's just regular running shoes with a little extra traction on the bottom.
So how have you done in the race besides surviving? Have you guys placed? I mean, how many people are in this thing?
It has a really high attrition.
I would imagine.
Yes. This last year was our best year. It was the first year that we did it that we didn't have a blizzard. Every year we've had snow issues, and this past year, which would have been 24, it was beautiful. Bluebird skies, you could see the Tetons on one side, the Wind River Range on the other. It was just gorgeous. And we ended up, I think we were probably 6th or 7th. It was a group of 4 of us, so we were in the top 10.
Nice.
And it was our fastest time.
Yeah.
We had been there. That was our 3rd time there. We do a little bit more, and then we had good weather.
Yeah.
But our goal was just to finish, but we did better than ever this past year.
Well, that's encouraging. So that's how many miles again?
It was 100 miles.
100 miles, and the elevation there's about, what, 6,000, 7,000?
We hit 10,000 twice.
Okay, wow. So you're getting up there.
Yeah, you get up there, and it's difficult, very difficult pulling that sled.
Yeah, what's the weight of that sled anyway?
It would be 35 pounds.
Okay.
35, 40 pounds.
Is this a specialized kind of a sled? Or?
It is.
Yeah.
It is. It's on I just bought a tool belt from Lowe's.
Okay.
And then you tie the sled to the side of it and pull it.
It's got rigid bars going back to keep it tracked.
It was just rope.
Just rope,
back.
okay.
That's what some people, you can do rigid bars, but we just did rope, so you can step back to it without taking off the belt.
Okay.
And get whatever food or water you want.
Gotcha. And that was 100 miles?
100 miles.
100 miles. Wow. So let me ask you, there's another race, since we're on this race topic here, and the ones that I know about, I'm not in the circle, but the Badwater to Whitney. Have you done that one?
I have not done
Okay,
that.
is that in your mind to do before it's all over here, or what do you think? That's brutal.
It is.
I don't know how that relates, but I mean, we're talking lowest point of the earth to in the Western Hemisphere.
And then up to the mountain. Yeah. I struggle in heat.
Yeah, that's the thing. I think they do it in July or June.
It's unreal.
Yeah, I can't fathom that.
I'll go back to the snow anytime.
Yep.
I'm going to avoid the desert.
I'm with you. Just stepping out of it. I remember the last time I was in Death Valley, it was, I had a group of students. We went through there to go to the Sierras, and just getting out of the car, it was 118 degrees. Mm-hmm. It was in June, and it was like, how could anybody handle this? Mm-hmm. And it can get hotter than that. So.
Yep.
Well, what about injuries? We talk about pain and adversity just during the whole thing, but people get hurt. What kind of injuries have you had that have set you back, and how have you dealt with that?
Yeah. My biggest injury that was the biggest challenge for me in my career was back injury. And I had my first back injury in gymnastics in high school.
Gotcha.
And
don't you hate it how those things?
Yeah.
I know. I've got a right hip. The reason I don't run much is because, teenage injury.
And it flared up on and off throughout my life, and then it really got bad. I was When we were living in Alabama, after we had kids and we had some horses, and I had a horse run over me, and he head-butted me right in my hip, right by where that back problem was. And that flared me up again, and that was my last, like, where I could point to injury, but the problem had been there for years.
Sure.
But it culminated in when I was turning 40 years old that year, I had a spinal fusion surgery.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
You've had a spinal fusion and you're doing this?
Yeah.
Okay, no excuse for me.
So I had so much nerve pain in my leg. I couldn't stand. And, at that time I was just bike racing, and it did not bother me while I was on the bike, but it bothered me when I stood, like when we went to church or when I was at work. I had to find a seat. I could not stand. And even in the shower, it got so bad that I couldn't stand long in a shower because I would have that radiating nerve pain.
Man.
And it was hard for me to make that decision because at that time I was racing bikes and I loved it, but it didn't bother me when I was sitting on that bike. But I just knew I had to do it because it had been going on for years and it was really affecting my life, and I went and had it done. That was a tough one. That's the hardest thing I've ever been through, recovering from that. It took a while, but yeah, it still bothers me some, but that's another thing I would say is that I've learned a lot with back injury is, for me, I feel better when I work out with back pain than when I don't. So I find that when I take a lot of time off for whatever reason, recovery, say from something really crazy, my back bothers me more than when I push myself physically. And I know everybody's different, but for me, that's how it works. It does better when I work harder than when I take time off. And I think you can get into that spiral where my back hurts and I better stop. And it's just for me, it gets worse and worse and worse. And it gets better when I do something harder.
It's not like it's fixing it, but it keeps it from declining.
Yes, and I guess it helps those muscles fire and relax around their spine or whatever where the problem is, and it's worked for me. But I had that fusion done when I was 40 years old. I had another emergency surgery where I had an endodeception in my guts, and it's like a very rare thing to happen in adults. It's usually caused by cancer, but I didn't have cancer, but I had to have major abdominal surgery and part of my colon removed due to that.
Oh my goodness.
And that's been within the last few years. And that was a challenge for a while to get over that. It's fine though now, and no problem. And then the only other thing I had is I had melanoma. And I had melanoma on the back of my calf. That I had to have surgery to have that removed, and that was from years of cycling and no sunscreen. Because actually I was pretty good about wearing it because my wife rode my case about it.
Of course.
But I never put sunscreen on my legs. And a friend of mine that raced we raced together, he ended up with melanoma on his ear that he got and is okay, and I ended up with one on the back of my calf. And I've attributed it to all that time in the sun, all those years of riding a bike. But it was all good, all taken away. Your son checks on me every year and makes sure everything's good. And, and other than that, I've never had any major joint or hip, knee, hip or knee problems. I've been blessed for that.
That's great.
Yeah. And just those little setbacks there.
You must have some good mechanics as far as your gait and all that stuff.
Or lucky.
Well, there's always a little bit of that. Yeah. Okay, let's kind of move into the final part of this interview here, but I just want to get into the spiritual because we're looking at mental, physical, spiritual. It all is connected in such a tight way. But, when you're out there all this time, I mean, you've already talked about it a little bit, but what kind of things do you listen to? What do you think about? What kind of scriptures maybe are anchor scriptures when you're, really digging deep?
Yeah. Well, my three favorite scriptures that kind of really define everything I do in my life, both, professionally and hobby-wise. And in Ecclesiastes, the one in Ecclesiastes says, everything your hand finds to do, do it with all your might. I love that scripture. I think it's Ecclesiastes 9. And then I love simple, straightforward things, and the whole duty of man, fear God and keep His commandments. I love that one because that kind of speaks to my directness and simple task.
Let's just do this
thing. Yeah. And not to get into the work things, that great thing.
No.
And then of course the golden rule. I mean, that's
Sure.
a big one for me. So those are important for me, and the everything your hand finds to do, do it with all your might is a big one, and that's just the way I try to do things. It's like if I set my sights and this is what we're going to do, that's what we're going to make it happen.
What about music? Do you ever have any particular music that is kind of part of your experience?
I listen to music some, but not a lot. I don't know if that's something that goes away when you get older, because like I've run some with my boys and they like music a little more. Yeah. And I think it's something that kind of goes away. And, I listen to older stuff that was,
sure.
The things you listened to when you were younger.
Yeah.
But I really don't. And
I get you.
I listen to books and audio books, and then I like the silence. And I love training at night alone and just being in the woods in the dark.
So you must be using a headlamp.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, that's the nice thing nowadays. The gear, I mean, go back to the 90s, and what we have today is quite different.
The light is, they're great lights now. But I like that, and I like being alone in the woods. I just enjoy it. It's quiet, and there's something about that in that ultra race when you hit that probably 3 or 4 hour mark in the event, and your body's adapted enough to okay, I realize we're here for the long haul now, and this is going to go on. So it's kind of settles in and settles down. Your mind settles down, and you work. There's nothing else that matters right then but survival and that race. And that can be like a spiritual type moment, because everything,
it's kind of meditative almost.
It is. Everything just goes away, and it's just everything is just focused and quiet. And they're definitely, for ultra distance trail running, especially when you're in the woods, there's a definite spiritual component. I mean, just the nature, just seeing the deer, the animals, the trees, the mountains, the snow, whatever, the storms, it's a definite spiritual component to all of that.
I like to really ask guys about this, because this is what I feel when I'm out, in nature, is you don't feel it very often, otherwise it wouldn't be the awesomeness that it is. But have you been on one of these endurance races, or even just training, where you just kind of are just overwhelmed with the awe of God because of some beauty or something you experienced?
Yeah, that was, I had that in Tahoe. We did a 200-miler around Lake Tahoe. There were some spots there that are, we had that. And then in that snow race in Wyoming, there were some places where that was, it was unbelievable views. And then here's a quick story. In the race the last 200-mile race we did in Canada, it was the 4th night. So for me, I know that's going to be, things are going to run off the rails for me that 4th night. Yeah. And they were running off the rails, and I didn't know where I was. I didn't know what was going on.
Unbelievable.
I just like one step in front of the other. Cody was with me. He did
really?
that race with me, my oldest son.
No kidding.
And then a couple other guys were around. Everybody was a little bit loopy, and just like we were trying to get to the car. The car was within a couple miles, and we were going to take a little nap, but we had to get there. And so they were kind of gone, and it was just this state of confusion in your mind, and you just didn't know where you were or what you're doing. And I'm trying to figure out why am I out here in these woods right now? What am I supposed to be? It's a strange feeling. And then I see in front of me, I see this being with this light behind it, and I was like, oh God, this is an angel come to help me. And it was my wife.
It was an angel.
Yeah, she's loved that story because she's like, she loved being referred to, but she was there waiting to get me in their car. But yeah, I saw God there because I was looking for anybody to help me at that moment, and that was funny and a good experience too.
So now that you bring up your wife, let's get to anybody that trains at this level. It can be a strain on relationships. I saw a meme once that said something like, if you have time for a relationship, you're not training hard enough.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've seen that one, but it just seems the amount of time that you've got to be putting into it, you've got to have an exceptional wife.
Oh yeah, for sure. Agree 100%. And yeah, she's patient with me and puts up with it, and has for a lot of years. And now she hates the 200-mile distance stuff.
Oh, yeah.
In fact, we made a deal at this last one that I would stop doing those, and I would never take my son again.
Okay.
So I agreed to that deal.
Your firstborn, you're going to kill him.
So hundreds are okay, but no more 200s. But she gets nervous about the safety and the danger, and she sees us when we're don't know who, what, when, where, why, and it kind of disturbs her. But yeah, she's a good woman, very patient, and has been supportive, and we've not been an issue.
That's cool. Yeah. That's cool, because you can't, you're not doing this alone.
No.
In the end,
exactly.
You have to have an understanding wife. You know, in any endeavor, really. I think that like in what I'm doing in ministry, I feel like there's a calling, and sometimes it takes a lot out of me. And, my wife's learned to say, well, it's just a season right now that I've got a lot going on. And then there'll be some times where I've got a little bit more margin. But I think that ebb and flow of life is just unavoidable.
Yeah. She's very, very good. I couldn't ask. It's a blessing.
Yeah.
It's a blessing to have a good wife, a good marriage, and stability there.
Yeah, that's huge. Yeah. That's huge. Well, let's just wrap up. I know that I was in this form thing, family, occupation, recreation, message. I don't know if you have any message for guys, just any challenge, and maybe if there's any books or resources that have really been helpful to you in any area of life.
Yeah. I mean, I would just I always encourage people to go do something. And whenever I've ever had anybody come to me and say, I'm thinking about doing whatever, name it.
Yeah.
I will never say don't do it. I'm always like, go do it. You got to go do it. And I would just encourage whatever it is, a backpacking trip, a 5K, anything, just make that first step. And it's the endurance side of this is a contagious thing. It kind of gets in your blood, and I think you'll want to do more, and especially the trail running. I think the trail running for older people is a great thing too. It just doesn't beat you up, and so I would just encourage guys to set a goal and challenge yourself, and you'll be shocked at what you can do if you pour yourself into it, and physically, mentally, you can do unbelievable things. Just push it, and don't be satisfied until you get it done. And I would encourage people to do that. And then, for me, of course, the spiritual side, it's just quietly always there. It's a big part of my life and how I was raised, and for me personally, how I look at just like a weekly church. I know it's easy to get out of the habit of going to church, and there's other things going on, but I look at it like this: is like you're in a fight all week long, whether it's work or family or whatever, and you're just constantly bombarded with stuff, and you've got these challenges and stressors and whatever, whether it's you've got little kids or trouble at home or work stress. And that day, though, that one day that you can just, it's like you've been dirty all week, and you're going to take a bath. You're going to put all that aside and reset. That's for me what the Sabbath has been, because whether you're training hard or just work stress or whatever, just having that day, and don't forget about that day to step aside from all those things and cleanse yourself of that noise and that stuff that clings to us from working hard and being stressed all week. Step away from it for a day and get outside. Just get outside. That's a underutilized asset that God gave us, is to be outside. It cures a lot of things.
With those you love.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that package that God ordained at the foundation of the world, before sin even came, that weekly cycle of saying, stop.
Yeah.
Stop.
Yeah.
And it's hard to stop.
It is hard to stop.
It's really hard. I know it's hard for me.
It is hard to stop.
One thing, as you were talking about endurance, and this kind of maybe a good place to end on a spiritual note. We're moving in time towards the Lord's return, and there's a phrase in Revelation that I've come to really appreciate in a beautiful way, and that is, where it talks about the patience of the saints. Here they have the testimony, the faith of Jesus, but that patience of the saints, when you really look it up in the original language, it's cheerful endurance. And I love that message.
Yeah.
And, this endurance thing, not quitting. One of the teachings I do with guys is the hand, and, to be encouraging, thumbs up, follow directions, be humble, take correction as well. Yeah. Zingers, we're not negative. We're not putting each other down. We're encouraging. We keep the thumb of negativity down with the middle zinger finger down with the thumb of encouragement. Yeah. And then the ring finger is don't quit. Yeah. Our commitments and our relationships and the ultimate endurance, what you've been talking about is a whole nother realm, but particularly in our relationships, we're not going to quit.
No.
We're not going to fail. We're not going to fall. And then the pinky is, like you had this team out, in Wyoming doing this big race. I'm sure there was, at times, somebody was struggling.
Oh, yeah.
But when you're in a team, you got to slow down. You take care of each other. And out of that, the love that you have for one another. I bet you guys are pretty tight.
It is. There's nothing like the bonds that come out of suffering together.
It's true.
It's true. And it's, the bonds that we have with those guys, and, it's hard to explain.
Yeah. Well,
when you go through, and we've done a lot of stuff and been through a lot of hard things together and seen each other at our lowest lows and highest highs. It's quite a bond.
Interesting. Yeah. Throughout history, again, back to people worked together in the field, they battled side by side. We're missing that. Yeah. In today's world, and this really resonates with me as another avenue to experience that side-by-side suffering and be joyful about it. And we're going to make it through this. Yeah. That's a mindset that really should resonate with every man that's listening. Yeah. So anyway, Jay, any last words as we just say our finals?
No, I appreciate what you're doing, and appreciate your ministry and the opportunity to be here. And thank you. Good luck.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, this has been a wonderful interview with Jay McElroy. And anyway, what is there any website? You don't have anything that you do on a level that you a lot of times we have people and they've got some kind of a platform that they can check into you, but you're just...
I don't.
Yeah, and that's good.
Yeah, I'm not big into social media or any of that stuff.
That's right. Yeah. You can find Jay out on the trail, maybe out in Wyoming, but anyway, good to have you on this podcast, and thank you for blessing us. And until next time, guys, take care and God bless.
Thank you.